Okay. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WIC TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Gang, have we got a show for you tonight? One of the most important aspects of politics today is the lack of trust in institutions across the board. People do not trust Congress. They do not trust academia. They do not trust doctors. They do not trust science. Lack of trust is raging. So in this world and in this setting where we have to decide who is more worthy of our trust, the options that we have are the Republican Party and its operatives and the Democratic Party and its operatives. And the question becomes, which of these is more worthy of our trust? Or is it a secret third thing? We're going to get to it. We're going to talk about it. I've gathered a whole host of people to discuss. And I want to start with Non-Fawn. Non-Fawn, opening us up. tell people who you are, tell people your thoughts, and then we'll just go around the room. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm non-fun. I'm a liberal streamer, YouTube, Twitch, and Kick. Should all be on screen. Um, I'm gonna say the Democrats are usually more trustworthy. I think there are three kind of main things when it comes to it. I think we can all agree. All politicians, all parties are gonna mislead us to some extent. But I think the things that matter are, firstly, saying things that are true. And then there's saying things that you believe to be true. And then there's the magnitude of the lies that you do tell. And I think Democrats do all three better, essentially. I think that's evident firstly, when I say the big lie, we all know which lie I'm talking about. Not only were the claims that Trump and other like hardcore MAGA people made about the 2020 election not true, the people making them did not care if they were true or knew that they were not true. And that's a lie of a magnitude that I would imagine is bigger than any other lie in politics in the last 20 years, at least. At least when you have Democrats claiming certain things like lab leak was a conspiracy, I think that turned out not to be true. But I don't really have any doubt that the Democrats saying it believed it to be true. I don't think that is true when people like Marco Rubio are saying that Biden's job numbers are fake. I don't think Marco Rubio actually thinks that. I think he's totally indifferent to the truth on that. There are also issues with the way Trump specifically speaks. So basically, anytime Trump speaks, I have to guess whether he's being serious or not. And different Trump supporters will tell me different statements of his are serious. So different Trump supporters will tell me different things about if Trump actually wants to take over Gaza or if Trump actually thinks trade deficits are bad. And I also think the last thing is, following through on the promises that you make. I mean, PolitiFact, has their measure and they show Biden did better than Trump throughout their first terms. In fairness to Trump, I don't know what should actually constitute a promise from him because most of his policies announced on Truth Social posts at 2 a.m. And it's hard for the Republican Party to actually follow through on their promises when occasionally they're held hostage by the Freedom Caucus and can't even choose the Speaker of the House. I'm good.
Okay, thanks for being here. We will get into it, I'm sure, as we go. Next up, we have Lactoid, please.
The only person you can trust is Donald. No, I'm kidding. I think generally speaking, figuring out who to trust is a very difficult endeavor because it's not necessarily dependent on how many lies that they told. It's some kind of matrix between how many lies and the magnitude of those lies and how close to the truth those lies are or how far away from the truth those lies are, and what's the context in the person saying it. And so coming to this is not an exact science about like who is more dishonest, who is more of a liar. I think that so generally we just have to kind of talk in generalities and just sort of use heuristics to try to determine who we can trust and who we can't trust, just like we would do generally for a friend or any other kind of close relationship. So one of the things that, my position here is that hyper partisans generally can't be trusted, right? And determining who a hyper partisan is in of itself a little bit difficult, but there's some indicators, right? Like if somebody is entirely unable to concede any kind of criticism towards their ground, usually a sign that they're a hyper partisan, usually a sign that you can't trust them. If someone is able to say, yeah, this is pretty shitty, but like XYZ I think is more important. So that's why I'm going that route. But yeah, I totally understand why you'd have a problem with that. When people make concessions like that, that's usually a sign that they're a little bit more trustworthy. When it comes to politicians who by their very nature have to sort of be hyper partisan, it gets pretty difficult. This is kind of why I think politicians have a general reputation for being untrustworthy, which is fair. I expected this there's probably going to be portions of this where we just kind of go over prominent lies and dishonesty that each side has said throughout the past, whatever period of time. And, I got plenty of those lined up. I got information on a bunch of ones that I'm sure I'll bring up. But, even if we go through all the different things, it's going to be very difficult, I think, to find some kind of exact science as to who is more of a liar.
Okay. Thanks for being here. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of different directions we can go, and we'll see where the river takes us. We will go with the flow. Next up, a late addition to the show, but we enjoy having him. Joe Lewis, what are your thoughts? Introduce yourself and yeah, tell us what you think.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mulled over the question on Twitter that you sent over in the group. I don't know if that framing changed from the start of 6 to now, because I was a little bit late coming in. So my answer is gonna presuppose the Twitter response, because that was kind of what my mental was about. And I just came right in, sat down, and hit start studio. So bear with me. For me, I had a little bit of difficulty, to be honest with you. Because the question assumes trust in a party is the correct framework in how to navigate in political life. Both parties serve the billionaire elites, and those two groups that found their way in the Democratic and Republican Party are oligarchs and corporatists. And both those groups of people, sell the idea that their way of doing business in a political landscape creates freedom, creates trust, creates security, when really it just creates comfort within the system itself. Both of these ways of approach lead to some level of comfort in the people who support that. The real question for me isn't which party or politician builds trust, but why we trust a system designed to prioritize their interests over ours. A little analogy that I was kind of fiddling with this on the way up was like trusting a political party is kind of like trusting a cable company. You get two main options. So no matter which one you pick, you're still overpaying for a service that doesn't really have your best interest at heart. They both act like they're competing, but they're really part of the same system that keeps prices high, choices limited, and your internet in some level of disarray. And the problem isn't which provider you pick, but it's the system that forces you to pick between bad options while pretending you have real freedom of choice. So I hope the conversation today kind of engages with the premise itself of like, well, what is trustworthiness? Why do we have entire groups of people who uncritically trust politicians who are bought and paid for by oligarchs? If we look at Donald Trump, bought and paid for by corporatists. If you look at the Democrats, whether that be Joe Biden all the way to the Obama years or farther back. And why is it that we continue to get this manufactured trust and have to play these games, as Lactoid is alluding to, about picking apart lies and trying to play like, well, how many lies is tolerable until we realize that we can trust them? I don't necessarily think that's a good way of going about this avenue of like political engagement and like understanding the political process personally. But yeah, I mean, I hope we can engage with that.
Okay, well, thanks for being here, and yeah, you're pretty on point with the topic at least. So don't be too distraught. No, we'll work with it. Next up, Brandon, please.
Hi, I'm Brandon S101. I sometimes stream, but not really that often. I mostly just try and keep up with politics and all this lies and stuff like that, and try and find the truth. So I was going to say the Democrats are 100% more trustworthy, especially since Trump became the head of the party. It's not really even the Republican Party anymore. It's the MAGA Party, especially since the old guard has left or been kicked out. There's been so many lies told that it's hard to keep track of. There's been some studies. There was one in 2012 that said that you're more educated and more likely to be informed if you don't watch any news than if you watch Fox News. There was a study in 2013 that said that Republicans were more likely to lie and say non-truthful things than Democrats. And I guarantee it's only gotten worse since then. I'm sure we're going to talk about the 2020 election. Trump saying he saved the ACA when he didn't. It was McCain. There's vaccine lies. Now a 90% Trump County in Texas has a measles outbreak. I remember when it used to be the far left that didn't vaccinate their kids. You had the Obama birther and religion lies, the Kamala birther and religion lies, the FEMA lies, president being able to shut down the government agencies lies, Zelensky's wife buying designer lie, which ties into Russian propaganda, which Tucker Carlson is
big person for that now. The Obama/Trump Supreme Court election year stuff that went on. Not liking billionaires unless they're Musk. Members of Congress believing in QAnon. Marjorie Taylor Greene believing in Jewish space lasers. The trade war with Canada and Mexico. Also, if you don't bend the knee and support Trump, you get kicked out. We've seen that with Liz Cheney, McCarthy, Adam Kinzinger, most recently with Chip Roy, who didn't like how they wanted to push up the budget. There's just so much misinformation and conspiracy theories, either maliciously spread or not, by Republicans and Trump yapping, that it's really hard to keep track of it all. And normal people that don't keep up with politics end up falling for it. I'm not saying the Democrats are perfect, but they are 1,000% better than MAGA.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. We'll get into it as we go. And in the interest of time, just conciseness, gang. Conciseness. I got to stress this. Brianna, please, give us what you got.
Yeah, so I'm Brianna. I go by Bri Lives online on a lot of things. I don't really stream. I normally just kind of throw my voice out into the internet on Reddit and Twitter sometimes. Based on kind of the past 15 or so years of kind of my political awareness of what's going on in the country, the Democrats have shown themselves to be clearly the more trustworthy party. There's certainly problems on both sides. I think other panelists have alluded to this. But I think the conduct of Democrats is generally better. Democrats do not create these fishing expeditions on congressional committees and talk about how we need to not waste money. You have incidents like that going back to Benghazi with the Hunter Biden stuff, things like that. When the conduct of representatives in Congress is poor, Democrats generally try to hold them to account. There's generally pushes for resignations when there is clear evidence of misconduct that becomes public. This has happened several times, most recently with Bob Menendez. Whereas Republicans tend not to resign unless they plead guilty or they just deny that anything happened, like Donald Trump. I think he is the epitome of this. He has not been held accountable for any of his both immoral and illegal conduct. Yeah, that's about what I got.
Okay, well, thank you for being here, and we'll get into it as we go. And last but certainly not least, Addison Gillis. What are your thoughts?
Hey. Thank you for inviting me. I am going off of the premise that neither party can be trusted. I'm open to changing my mind on this, though. I think there's two ways to view this question. There is, can politicians be trusted or not? And can the voters be trusted or not, those that are loyal to one party or the other? And one of the things that makes voters most untrustworthy is when they aren't listening and adapting to what the other side is saying. So that's all.
Remarkably concise. Okay. Well, this is a refrain I hear, and I see it in chat, and I see it just in general, right? Like, neither party is trustworthy. And that's fair as far as it goes, right? And I get what Joe Lewis is saying about the system being broken in such a way that it doesn't matter. I disagree with Joe on this, though, right? I think it does. Given that we have the choices before us, right? Wouldn't it make sense to pick the one that, like, we have to put one of these groups in charge of the country, right? Just based on what we have. You disagree? Go ahead, please. Why?
Yes, there are some times in history when parties fade from relevance, and I think the Democratic Party is at that point. I don't think voting for this party is a useful thing to do at this juncture.
I'd go as far as to say both are, but it's a little bit more complicated than that for me. I didn't want to stop you mid-flow, Wick, but like, I guess to everybody else, I respectfully don't know what you mean when you talk about trust. So I know that, like, questioning the intelligence and questioning and going through definition trees is not necessarily a productive thing. So I guess the way they'll ask it is, do people trust a party because they believe in its vision, or just because it promises short-term stability?
That's a question for you.
Well,
guys,
I mean,
gang. What do you
If
think?
it's something else, then I'd love to hear it.
I guess when I think about trusting the party, I just mean when there are, prominent figures or politicians in it, if they make a statement how much faith do I have in that statement being true, sort of before I know like anything about the topic. And like right now, my faith in Hakeem Jeffries making a comment and that statement being true is a lot more than if Mike Johnson or another kind of MAGA Republican dude was to make one.
Well, I mean, sure. So like if you're a Democratic supporter right now, then what are you trying to do? Like, do you want to trust people because you believe in your own vision of what should be going forward? Or do you want them to trust you so that there can be some level of short-term stability in your eyes? Because again, like they support different things. Like Democrats and Republicans support different things, and they support different approaches of governance. The systems still stay in place in whatever way, so it's a little bit tricky to do like radical change. But I guess the thing that I'm really confused about is what's the end goal of trust for either party? Like, what are they trying to accomplish? I know it's very easy to say, well, they're trying to just win the election. But again, that's why I talked about comfort in my statement, because, and maybe I'll just throw this out and see what you think about it, is that I don't necessarily think that people are really aiming for the vision of either of these parties. I think that Donald Trump argued that his way of governance and being beholden to oligarchs and being beholden to individual billionaires leads to comfort in the people at large. And then Democrats basically acted like caretakers. They're like, hey, we don't have the answers to any of these problems, but we can at very least slow down the bleeding of fascism, slow down the emergence of Donald Trump and the Christian right. We don't know how to really solve to eradicate these things that we deem undesirable, but at least we can hold this off, and that can lead to comfort to people around them. So I guess like in that sort of framing, like how does one present to be more trustworthy? And then what does trust even mean in that regard?
I think I support the Democrats more because I just believe in their ideology a little bit more. Like, I mean, I'm a liberal. I believe in.
Can you speak that a little bit? Like, what's their ideology?
Let them cook. Let them cook. Let them.
I mean, I'm a liberal. I believe that like everyone should be treated equal. Trans people, gay people, any person of color. Doesn't matter what your sexuality is. All that stuff. And I think Republicans are a lot more hateful. I mean, you see it all the time. Just look at what happened with the Super Bowl, and also with Democrats. I mean, you can look this up.
Super Bowl. Hold on.
From what I saw,
Taylor Swift.
Oh no! I was going to.
I think it means the halftime show.
The halftime show, yeah. There were some people besides conservatives that hated the halftime show, but it mostly seemed like it was conservatives that were hating the halftime show. My entire family is conservative, and all of them were saying it was the worst halftime show ever. And I think.
Wait! You got to like the halftime show now?
I mean.
It wasn't my favorite. I didn't think it was all that.
I mean,
good.
I'm not saying that you have to hate it.
Well, there are good reasons to like it and bad reasons to not like it, right?
I thought it was sure. I agree. If somebody's like looking at the TV and saying like racial slurs, probably pretty bad. But like for me, I thought the whole thing was like disjointed, right? It wasn't like very coherent to me. Like they were jumping around between songs.
I don't want to get too distracted. I mean, it's my fault. My fault. Asking. I
generally don't like halftime shows.
I hadn't seen it, but I guess to the question that Joe's asking, right? Like, so as Democrats, and there's a couple of you on here, right, that are professed Democrats or at least voting for Democrats and things like that. What do you want, or what? When it comes to trust in Democrats, what does that mean to you, right? What do you want Democrats to accomplish?
I mean, I think for me, I like trust the movement and like kind of, I guess the ideology, but like
what? Hold on. What is when you think of Democrats as a movement or an ideology? What do you mean?
So, let me try and articulate. So. Just like that progressives and Democrats kind of have a vision for America that's based broadly on social democracy terms of kind of a welfare state, trying to expand rights so that everyone is protected in an equal measure under the law with the 14th Amendment, just making sure that is done. I don't think Republicans really have had for the past 10 years or so, a kind of governing message beyond being a party of permanent opposition, no matter if it's in power or not. I mean, when they run the government, they can barely get things together. The government shuts down all the time. And they're the ones usually doing the ones with the shutdowns. So, I mean, I trust the movement broadly, and I trust that Democrats are trying to see that vision into reality, whereas I don't see Republicans doing that. I don't see what their ideology is. They've professed talking about fiscal responsibility for years, and I have not seen them do that with, as I said earlier, wasteful spending in these ridiculous fishing expeditions that they go on. The chaos that Elon Musk is doing now that's going to have to get overturned, and it's just going to cost so much money fucking around with this.
I'm just kind of I'm still very confused. And maybe I really want to pin you down on this because I don't want to feel like you're doing word vomit, but you kind of are. But maybe there's a way of asking this a different way to really drill down to it, right? So if you had to pick one thing in your political navigation that you value above everything else, what would that be?
Probably moving in kind of a more social democratic direction. So probably trying to push
as far as you, or moving as far as people.
Like passing policy initiatives that would move. Like, let's get a public option in healthcare out there. Let's try and figure out things with how we can equalize funding in public schools across different places, whether that's, I know I work in schools, so like some areas have much more funding because of property values and things. I know education's a big state issue, but the Department of Education is a big thing. I like the Department of Education. I think it does good things, even though it may make some missteps here and there. I mean, broadly, I kind of just support the institutions, and Democrats want to make those institutions try to work better for more people.
So can I give an analogy or was a situation? I would go as far as to say that say no to drugs worked. That wasn't a political effort as far as writing legislation was concerned, but that absolutely was a culture, a socialized culture of just saying no to drugs, where it worked on me. Like, I don't smoke, I rarely drink. Even in the adverse of marijuana resurgence, I'm still skeptical. I think vaping is degenerate. I think smoking is degenerate. And that came for a few things, right? It came from watching my mother smoke her entire life and then die from the very thing that she enjoyed. And a lot of my family members suffering from adverse side effects. And it wasn't a politician coming to politically tell me not to do this thing. It was just Dare. It was just a couple years of Dare, remembering that song, and then that was it. And I also think back to the idea of women not having to marry their spouse when they got pregnant. That was just a thing that you did without any legislation, without any law that said, if you cometh inside of woman, therefore you must marry them within 9 months. That was just a thing that was in the culture thing. I say all that to say,
yeah, let's
that
land this plane. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe, and what I hear from you is that you have frustration in the political process, but there seems to be skepticism in your trust in Democrats engaging in social institutions to solve these problems. That's the feeling that I'm getting from what you were saying, because you mentioned that you trust institutions, and that's good. And you mentioned the ideas of like laws and solidification, but when it came to the idea of Democrats moving in a social way, I didn't really hear that in your response. I'm just curious why that was. And I want to assume that you don't believe in social institutions and like engaging in the political process through social institutions. But I just wondering what you think about that.
I mean, I kind of more said like social democratic, so like social democracy. But I mean, social institutions are super important. I mean, I work in a public school system. Public school systems are important, so I don't like when public school systems are being attacked unfairly. I think there's a lot of hysteria about DEI going on, and it's kind of weaponized a lot. I think there's a lot of misinformation that happened about schools shutting down. I mean, social institutions are important. Is the government not a social institution?
Well, let's Lactoid wanted to jump in here. Maybe you can kind of get us a little bit
Well,
on
I guess I'm
track
a little bit
little.
confused. Yeah, I'm a little bit
Yeah.
confused. Like, the current line of discourse just seems to be, why do you guys Democrats? Oh, it's because I like the policies, but that's not really getting to whether or not they're trustworthy. I mean, you can have somebody who's very honest and trustworthy tell you something to your face that's like you could agree with or disagree with, right? If somebody's running to say like I am running on the idea of killing a third of the population, they're a very honest person at that point. I fully believe them, right? But I'm not voting for them because this person's like terrifies the fuck out of me, right? So I guess maybe this is more of a question. I mean, where is this going in terms of establishing trust? Like, is this about policy, like just policy desire, or in terms of trustworthiness? I guess that's where I'm struggling. What's happening? I guess that's my question.
It's a good question. I do think that like understanding what policies we want is a different question than understanding who should the American public trust. I guess I'll just start with this. Maybe we'll get this back on track. Right?
Could I start? Actually, could I ask a question, Wick? Could I step on you and just ask a quick question that I think is directly relevant to the Democrats?
If it's not,
the Dems,
I will mute you. Okay.
The demon
if it's
rat.
not,
okay.
If it's not a good question, I will mute you for a few minutes.
Sure. Yeah. Straightforward question. Do you guys think that Democrats are trustworthy? Not more than Republicans. Do you think that they are just generally, would you describe them as trustworthy?
Who do you
raise your hand
Democrats,
if you think Democrats are trustworthy? Just raise your hand.
Do you just mean the politicians, or do you mean
Democrat politicians? Yes, the party itself. When the Democrat politicians say something, say they'll do something, or state a fact about the world, do you feel that they are trustworthy? Yes or no? Right? If you say yes, raise your hand. If you say no, keep your hand down.
I think some are. Like
I would say most of the time, I assume they're acting in good faith. Even if the statement itself is not true, I don't know if I can make that same statement for Republicans.
Wait. Even if the statement itself is not true, what does that mean?
As in, like, if they make a claim, even if it's not true, they probably believe it to be true and aren't being reckless the same way I think a lot of Republicans usually are.
So do you think John Fetterman is 100% serious when he does not believe that there's a genocide in Gaza and that the displacement is actually a good thing for Palestinians? That's just something he genuinely believes?
I think John Fetterman might be a little bit crazy at this point, but I would guess that, yeah, he does actually believe that.
Okay,
even if he believes that because he's a little crazy.
What's a Palestinian to do in America then, if that's the representative?
Well, I mean, I would understand them being or not liking him. I wouldn't say, I would understand them even not voting for him. I guess that doesn't have much to do with like whether or not he's trustworthy, though. Like, I would assume, in fact, they probably only don't like him because they think he does actually believe that it's not a genocide in Gaza. That's probably a big reason why they don't like him. Like,
can I just point out that like nobody raised their hands like specifically to describe the Democrats as trustworthy. Like that's the state of our current politician, like of our current politics.
Sure, I think you are right in that like hyper-partisans usually aren't trustworthy, and Democrats and politicians by their nature kind of have to be hyper-partisan, so they're almost never gonna like admit fault in like the Democratic Party. Like, I'll say, like, there are obviously, like, I have a Biden head behind me. I'll say, like, there are plenty of, I don't like a lot of the tariffs Biden did, but I'm still like a Democrat overall.
Well, that's a policy. That's a policy decision, though. Like,
sure, but I don't
tariff decisions, etc. I mean, that's whatever. I'm looking for in terms of like when they look at you in the eye and they say something, like, do you trust them? Like, if they made a claim, like, let's
for instance, take like, I mean,
only
I
if
know
they looked at me like that.
I understand people feel some type of way about talking about Gaza and talking about the Strip and Palestine more broadly. So let me like pick a different thing, because I guess people are still just allergic to that topic. If I'm somebody who lost my entire life in a fire, how am I and Gavin Newsom says we're going to work to get what you lost back, what do you think somebody should do with that? Should they trust that they're going to do that? And if they do, what exactly does it mean to trust in that situation?
So I would trust that he is at least going to try to do that. Like when it comes to is he actually going to do it, it's more of a question of how much faith we have in Democrats governing versus, I guess, Republicans governing, and that's kind of a different question. But
that's kind of a fucked way to navigate, no? Like if somebody comes to you and says, I understand you experienced a tragedy external to your own life, and we're going to work to get what you lost back. And then in the back of it, it's like, well, they're going to try. For a lot of these people, I would argue try isn't really good enough. Because the alternative is we understand that there's a homeless problem in California. And now you are introducing an entire new population of unsheltered people into an already stressed system. And then it's going to be indistinguishable between somebody who lost their life or lost their livelihood because of a fire and somebody who lost their livelihood due to bad circumstances. And bad circumstances could have just been the fire itself. So I guess like the reason why I'm kind of pushing is because, again, trustworthiness, and Lactoid I think is knocking on this too, feels very feelings based.
Well, it is. At the end of the day, who you trust is feelings based. Yeah. Let me read this super chat because I want to make a little money tonight. $20 from Pondering Politics. In PolitiFact founder Bill Adair's recent book, Beyond the Big Lie, he confirms that the pre-Trump GOP lied more frequently and more egregiously than Dems, per fact-checking analyses, and it's gotten worse since Trump. Thank you for the $20.
How would you objectively measure egregiously?
You'd have to read the book. I don't know. I haven't read the book.
I'm not buying that guy's book.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
but back to the point at hand, right? Like I understand.
No chance.
I understand, like, trustworthiness is feelings based to an extent.
It's not though, Wick. That's just one. That is the
when I am talking to someone, right? When I'm interacting with an individual or a group, even part of do I trust this person, especially if I have very little previous interaction with this person. Say I'm a new voter. I haven't really been in politics much. I haven't really interacted with politics much. I'm a young guy, right? I go in and I'm trying to decide, well, you know what? I want to become politically active. Which of these sides available should I put my trust in? Who is going to do right by me? Who is going to keep their word to me? Is it going to be the Republicans or is it going to be the Democrats? Part of that is necessarily feelings-based. That is how we make decisions in life. It just is, right?
Can I get in real quick?
I think you inserted something that I don't want to let you run away from. What's that you instead of entering a new political person should be asked the question, what interests you? What do you care about? Before you even get to a conversation about party. I don't think you should get into the conversation about party at all in a lot of cases. You can maybe talk about that when you get to the ideas of electoralism and political like figures and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I would really hope people are not politically motivated just by virtue of a political party alone. I would hope that people are motivated about seeing something within their conditions that spark them to be a bigger change in whatever that case may be.
But once you come to that point, you have to choose a vehicle with which to enact your will, right?
Okay.
So you as a individual only have a vote, but part of the collective organizing, collectivism in general is picking a vehicle or a group which can help you get closer to your goals. And I think that's where the conversation, or where I think the conversation will eventually lead, right, is which of these groups that we have, and we can include 30 parties in this, right? We can include the Libertarians, we can include the Green Party, we can include a few other third parties, right?
You can always trust Libertarians. True.
It's like this is why y'all shit is so fissured. Because the very idea of working with a libertarian gives you stage 4 cancer. Like, of course you're going to disagree with libertarians on issues. However, if you're looking at a particularity in a political landscape, you should be able to go, hey, libertarians, I need help with this. Do you agree? Do you agree that this problem is a problem? Great. Let's work together towards this problem.
I
It
agree
shouldn't
with you.
matter.
I mean,
No,
there are
I-
cases where I'm
it
perfectly okay
shouldn't-
with doing that.
I'm a Joe.
No, that's such.
We're not
that's
fighting here
such code.
because I agree with
This
you.
is such code.
And I think one of the failures of the Democratic Party.
You don't, because we understand that in both parties, as they currently exist, they are oppositional to libertarians, communists, anarchists, anarcho-libertarians, left Hegelians, right Hegelians. And one of the reasons why we even got Donald Trump in the first place is because of that division across ideological lines. And the minute, like, when Democrats are done purity testing the communists, Greens, and leftists out of their movements, they're stuck losing to Donald Trump twice. They're stuck not having any type of answer post-Reagan. And I think
it's
something
almost
that's
the
more
opposite.
powerful...
It's
I think something
almost
that's
the
more
opposite.
powerful
We
in
worked
trust.
with these groups, trusting them when we should not have. We worked with the communists. We worked with the Green Party. We tried to make alliances and things. And when it came time to vote, they fucked us. That's what happened.
They
right?
did not want to work with the Democrats
let me
at
just
all.
make this incredibly a bit more clear, right? Or maybe it's just a different angle of looking at this, right? When I think of trustworthiness, it's not about feels for me. I'm beyond that. It's about, if I see you in this political landscape, can I trust you to get work done substantive to the things that matter in this political moment? That's what I think of when I think of trust. And when I look at, for instance, Jill Stein and Butch Ware and the entire Green Party infrastructure, that answer to me is no. When I look at the PSL, that answer to me is no. When I look at the DSA, that answer to me is no. When I look at the mainstream DNC and the mainstream RNC, that answer to me is no. What makes the Democratic Party and the Republican Party so nefarious is because they're beholden to billionaires. Though the billionaires, whether it be the Elon Musks of the world or the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Citibanks, the Chase banks, they require these political parties to move in a particular way towards their interests. That's not consistent with the people. What the politician's job is at that point is to try to present what they're doing, beholden to these corporations, that this is the correct way. So while Democrats talk about we're never going to, like, we're so climate conscious and we're not going to fuck the planet.
If a billionaire wants to do something that you want to do, why won't you work with them?
Excuse me?
If a billionaire wants to, for example, if there was a billionaire out there,
reduce government waste.
Hey, we can use that as an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to reduce government waste. They say it, they may not mean it, right? This
they
goes
mean
back to the trustworthy thing, right?
No, let's say they mean it.
They say it, okay? You believe them. Why wouldn't you work with them just because they're a billionaire?
Wait,
like this idea that parties are well, the reason I asked this, right, and let me put my cards on the table, right, is because this supposition of the billionaires are antithetical to what the people want. I don't know if that's necessarily true. It often is the case. I will grant you. Often is the case, but there is many times where a George Soros or even an Elon Musk on occasion, right, will say something, and I think, I agree with that. I can work with that. And while, yes, I think the parties are beholden to money in a way that I think can be a problem, it doesn't necessarily make them untrustworthy. Does that make sense? And I want to get more people in on this, but I want you to respond to that. But then I want to expand the discussion and let other people in on this. But go ahead.
Democrats rely on billionaires through corporations, and the interests of the corporation supersede any issue. So as long as the Democrats move in a way that does not agitate corporate interests, banks, union lobbies, or lack thereof, oil companies, basically the entire oil industry, portions of the war industrial complex, they don't care. So when the rubber hits the road of these workers are being exploited by Amazon, therefore they ought to unionize, Democrats are quiet. Peep, not a peep. They're not going to support any type of legislation that protects unions from Congress or the president itself. The presidents will never openly say, I will not sign anything that will force Amazon into a deal. They won't. They will just be quiet when it comes to this type of unionization efforts. When it comes to wages, right? When it comes to all the DEI Costco nonsense, right? Everybody was like, support Costco, because Costco is actually, they have their DEI programs and they're going to still follow through with them. Meanwhile, they're paying their non-union workers wages up to $30 plus an hour. They're non-union workers, just so that the union workers can actually go into a deal. But that's fine because they have DEI.
Which party do you think supports unions more?
It's a relevant question. Like,
I mean, if you're a union leader, should you trust more? Should you trust a president that like bailed out pension funds
to do what?
What's trust in this context?
In your interest?
Trust to show up to the picket line. Trust
Dems
to
are
not
generally
intervene.
more pro-union.
Like, you can say
it should be a
that
pretty easy
Democrats.
answer.
Yeah, you can say that Democrats have had a history in certain particular contexts to be on the side of unions. But just because you're on the side of unions in one particular moment doesn't make you pro-worker. Like, being pro or anti something is a consistent position that you hold across your political career. It's not just some flashpoint that just randomly comes up. I'm just saying my broader point to this. Like, caring for Black people isn't some flashpoint because George Floyd's in the ground. Caring for Black Americans is something that should be a consistent policy thing that you can point to across decades. So in the face of something like Shelby Counter v. Holder, and all the Black Americans look to Democrats and say, hey, like, looks like they're kind of stripping constitutionality here. Are you going to do anything about it? And then Obama just goes, there's nothing I can do. My hands are tied. And it's like, then what's anybody who's in support of Black Americans supposed to do with that in terms of trust?
I do want to, open it up, get more people involved, right?
Black Americans saw higher segregation now than it was back in the 60s. And yet we're supposed to trust that Democrats care about schools and actually integrating communities in diverse environments.
Well, let's give them a chance to answer. Let's give them a chance to answer. We'll start with Bree, then Brandon, then I want to hear from Addison as well, and then I see non-fun and Lactoid, but go ahead.
One quick. I agree with Joe. Can't trust Democrats. Okay, go ahead.
So a few things kind of got asked in a while. I think trusting the party as a whole, part of it is I see a collection of individuals who I think have done a good job of building trust. I know you mentioned about the fires. I mean, I'm not a California resident, so I don't follow what Gavin Newsom does. But if Maura Healey went out after a hurricane and talked about trying to get people back into their homes, I would trust that Maura Healey's doing everything she can to have that happen. I mean, she was our Attorney General beforehand. She has a long history of consumer protection and suing companies who are violating Massachusetts laws. So I think there's trust in one level there, and then seeing multiple individuals kind of throughout state governments, federal governments is a way that you can start to trust a party. To the thing about, do we believe John Fetterman? I mean, I believe John Fetterman that there's not a genocide in Gaza, because I don't think there is. I think there's a legitimate debate to be had. I mean, there's an ICJ case, or ICJ, international courts are looking at it, but also there's an argument to be made that Israel's not intentionally trying to destroy the Palestinian people in part or in whole. So I mean, I think I would trust a more centrist. I mean, he presents himself as more centrist. He's coming from a swing state like Pennsylvania, so I would trust him in that, because I think that's what he believes he needs to do to do what he can to provide for the people in his state.
Brandon,
can I? Sorry.
No, if you want to interrogate I don't want to get into Palestine debate.
I'm not. I don't. Look. I hate that subject.
I think it's pretty important considering we're talking about trust.
Understand.
And
but I don't want it to just be on that. Does that make sense? Because there's so much more.
Can I just ask this question to Bree, and then I'll shut the fuck up about Gaza? Bree, do you trust that Donald Trump is going to actualize his plan of displacing Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and turning it into a land of real estate?
I hope he doesn't go through on that, but I have no idea what Donald Trump's going to fucking do. He does not care about the law. He does not care about the Constitution. So he will try anything he does to give himself power and use that power.
That doesn't answer my question. Do you trust that he is going to actualize, or at least try to actualize, that plan?
I mean, I don't trust Donald Trump as far as I could throw him, but he's an unpredictable person. I don't know what he's going to like.
So
he's
what
crazy.
do you? Okay, so then what do you do with that? You say you don't trust him on one side, but then you allude to, though, he's crazy. So, basically in your language, he might just do it anyway. So which one is it?
Yeah, he might, because he's an unlawless motherfucker. He doesn't care about the Constitution. He doesn't care about the limits it set on him. He tried to coup the government. Like,
okay, so
I want the Democratic Party to do all it can to oppose him. I don't like this whole, oh, let's all vote for Marco Rubio, because if Joe Biden had been reelected and we wanted to run a new Secretary of State, I don't think any Republican would have voted for them.
So where does Marco Rubio line up in this thing about trust if he just basically got shooed in for his role?
Well, I mean, I'm not the Democrats for doing that, but I still trust Democrats broadly for the reasons I said. Like, there's a lot of people in the party who I think are doing good things to make a social democratic progress. Like, I know we want like these good things, but we have to make progress in some way. Politics is a game of making sacrifices and trying to be pragmatic. We have to pick a side in the system we have. I don't like our system. I wish we had a more parliamentary system. It's not the system we have. We have to work within the shittiness of our system.
Okay, you had a question, Lactoid. I need to get to other people, right?
Sure. I mean, to give some credit. I mean, I think generally speaking, for example, like what did Trump run on? Like cutting inefficiencies and immigration, and largely the policies seem to reflect those intentions, right? So I think there's elements in which politicians do sort of fulfill the thing that they ran on, or at least substantively try to fulfill the thing they ran on. But I think the important thing to look at is, while this happens sometime, how do we know if it's going to happen every time? How do we know if it's going to happen with any kind of like consistency? A question I had for the Dems, especially the ones here who really hate Trump, okay, which is all of you, very predictably.
TDS.
TDS.
Can you trust us to do that?
Well, let's see how much I can trust you guys to answer this honestly. When almost every major figure within the Democratic Party looked at you right in the eye on camera and said, Biden is sharper than he's ever been. After the Hur report, when they looked you in the eye and said he's the sharpest he's ever been, a few weeks before he gave it up to give it to Kamala, when they kept saying this, did you trust that they were being accurate with you? Did you trust that Joe Biden was actually as sharp as they were telling you?
I mean, most of it. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. I would say overall, I did, just because my prior experience with the Democrats up to that point, they had been mostly, I guess, honest to me. And I think a lot of Democrats who were saying that probably didn't even know the full extent of Biden's decline. Because
when you say prior experience,
I mean, after the Hur report,
I don't know.
Sorry. I don't think you read it.
I know what the Hur report said. I guess I just don't put like that much credence in someone's like hardcore mental decline when like one report says, "Oh, we think he would present as sympathetic to a jury," and therefore.
Hold on, there was a lot more.
Well,
there was
the question. The question to you, Lactoid, would be when Trump and his cronies looked you in the eye and said that the election had been stolen in 2020. Did you believe them?
Based on the information we have, I think Trump does believe it was stolen. I think he's wrong. Based on the private phone calls that he had, in which basically he lost Georgia, and he's been talking to like close confidence, saying this fucking thing was rigged. Yeah, and look, you can use that as an impingement upon his character. You could say like that's ridiculous. Like this is somebody who should know that the things that he was saying weren't true.
Which do you think is worse?
Do I think that's a good question? I don't know. No. It is a good question
it's not. It's
but one is more.
One is trying to steal the country, like.
Yeah.
And
one is based in ignorance, and one is based
on trying to withhold the cognitive capacity of a person in power so that they continue to be in power. We watched Dianne
Oh, I think they're
Feinstein
malicious,
die
yeah.
on live television, and her best friend Nancy Pelosi protected her. And then weeks later, that bitch is in the dirt. We're watching Mitch McConnell die in real time while politicians are trying to act like he's fine, he's fine. That nigga is going to die before September. Joe Biden is going to die in the next 3 to 5 years, and he wasn't capable enough to continue for 4 years. Comparing Donald Trump consistently through his actions saying a particular thing, so much so that Lactoid can make the position that he believes that, and even though he believes that, he is wrong, and comparing that to an institutional project of trying to position Biden out for someone else is disgusting.
One is trying to
Like, that's
steal an election, and then one is an elected president who is like slowly dying, like what happened with Reagan. I think it's completely different. Trying to steal an election is completely different than an elected president slowly dying, like while he was elected in office. That's completely different, and one is way worse.
Can you walk me through the difference of why one's worse than the other?
Do you not think that the peaceful
I
transfer
think
of power
One
is,
uses
like,
more
really
hyperbolic
important?
language, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm again, like, something that's really interesting in conversations when I ask something is that then it goes right back to a question about taking a moral position. I'm asking you the differences that you are identifying between the two. I believe that comparing the two in context is ridiculous, but apparently you believe that comparing it in context is not. So I'm just asking you what you see.
Well, I mean, I do think that, like, the fact that Biden was, like, slowly, dying is bad. But I also think that
is that something you genuinely believe? Do you believe that Joe Biden is slowly dying and was slowly dying from starting as early as, we'll say, 2021, to be charitable?
2021, 2022, you could definitely
No,
say
his aides were saying, like, within the first year he was going.
I mean, yeah, probably, but I also think that that his cabinet did a good job. So, like, yeah, he probably maybe should have. I forget the amendment. Maybe he should have been kicked out. But at the same point, I do think that he was his cabinet overall did what he wanted them to do, and
I think
that's
that
the most important
lie.
thing.
I think that lie though led to led to consequences that potentially could be more lies, right? So, like, for example, you guys had a primary process in which you voted for Joe Biden. I know my friend Wick here voted for Joe Biden, and that was under the pretext that would matter.
I mean,
I don't think that consequence is as big as, to be charitable, inspiring some crazy people to break into the Capitol, and like.
I would go as far as
threatening democracy a lot more in terms of the trust that we have in our election system. I don't think this significantly erodes trust in our election system. I think
I would go as far to say that there were more Democrats in line for Joe Biden stepping down and being replaced by Kamala Harris than any alignment when it came to J6. I think J6 was incredibly disaggregated by the individuals. You had a few that were sympathetic from the political level, like politicians, Congress members, sort of like lower level state electors, but they were not moving in a unified approach to try to mislead the entire public about the competency of their leader. What they were trying to do, which I 100% agree with you, is to try to use their disaggregation and their power in certain political positions to try to seize power back. These are two different types of power grabs. But the thing that I have a concern about if we're talking about trust and actions of trust, if we find out that more Democrats understood about Joe Biden's frailties, understood about his unelectability in the moment, but still pushed him through anyway, and then in the last minute switched, I'm not too sure how you can trust Democrats with anybody they position moving forward. Because Nancy Pelosi, and many others have already spoken to the fact that they were the movers of this. This wasn't some type of small, subtle decision that Joe Biden made at his home when he's sick, coughing. This was like a institutional DNC effort to position Kamala Harris and then transfer all of that to her.
Frankly,
despite that being against the people.
I trust the DNC less because of that, much less because of that. I trust everyone involved in that much less, including Biden. I trust him less because of how he behaved during that, how his aides behaved, how the people around him behaved, how just everyone involved, whether to push him out or keep him in, behaved, and that was very much a betrayal of trust. Yes, we will just cop to that. It's an easy cop. But the question today, right? Does that mean that I don't trust DNC ever again? That would be silly. That would be a silly thing.
That would be, yes.
So I'll give you an example. It's the same reason a lot of people got caught with their pants down when American intelligence was saying Russia is going to invade Ukraine. Russia is on the border. They're going to go in. This is happening. And a lot of people were like, don't you remember Afghanistan and Iraq and the WMDs? Look at how they got it wrong. How could you ever trust? And they got made into fucking fools, because you have to remember, simply because it's not wise to always trust the government, it is equally unwise to never trust the government. And so when we have a situation like the DNC, absolutely, it has hurt its credibility. But that does not mean that it is now, by nature, all the time, always, something that you should never trust.
Well, even your the question is whether or not they're trustworthy. Like, even your non-trustworthy friend might tell you the truth now and then.
Well, the prompt was which one is more trustworthy. That was the original prompt.
It's a comparison.
Not which one are they trustworthy.
And because I don't trust Republicans at all. Like, you talk about being lied to, and we talk about and I'm passionate about this, Joe, as you know. Joe, you asked a question. Why should people of color trust the Democrats when they failed them in X, Y, and Z? Why should workers trust the Democrats when they failed them in X, Y, and Z? And those are fair questions. But when we look at under which regime do I think that workers will have a better deal, that unions will flourish, it's going to be the Democrats every time. Every time. And why do I say that? It's because of the policies that have been pushed by Democrats. Have they given everything that workers want? No. But in general, they have a much more pro-worker, pro-people of color, at this point, foreign interventionalism, right? And all these things I like, to be clear. These things are things I trust that the Democrats are going to do better than the Republicans. That's it. That's the game, right?
Do you trust Democrats to stop fascism? Do you trust them?
What does that mean, stop fascism?
They had a goal for the past 10 years to keep Trump out of office. That was the one thing the entire Democratic Party rallied around as the reason to vote Democrat. They were unsuccessful. They brought out
they failed at it. But does that mean
they failed super hard too? Oh, they got crushed.
Democrats are the caretakers.
Pretty close election.
Democrats are the caretakers of fascism. Republicans are the accelerationists. We can kind of move on from that. Democrats have no answer.
True.
Democrats have no answer to the Christian right. They have no answer to Donald Trump substantively. They have no answer to MAGA. But they do have an answer to is their long-term investments. They'll make selective long-term investments in countries, in corporations, in different institutions for the hope of some payback later in time. But they're not going to do anything to address the situation substantively. Donald Trump is more dangerous in a lot of ways because he's talking about the privatization of everything. He wants the banks to be privatized. He wants your mail to be privatized. He wants your online orders to be privatized. Every single thing that we deem to be a public good, what he wants to be privatized. And in that way, the government is never going to be involved in any of these issues and any of these problems that come from that privatization. And then, as those services erode, where we have a privatized postal service, no better than what people have in the UK, then he's going to come in and say, I can fix this thing. I can solve the problem that I created for myself. But he has no desire of solving the problem. He just wants to concentrate wealth to himself and his cronies. And the thing that Democrats present, which is why I'm trying to get to something that I think you guys deeply believe. I think if you are a Democratic supporter in this moment, you believe that corporations ought to have control of our public goods, ought to have control of our social programs, ought to have at least some level of say in what should happen. You don't necessarily believe that the federal government should be completely by themselves in these things. You believe that they probably want more involvement, but I've never seen or heard any of you engaged with the contradictions. If one of you is in education, and do you support the mass surveillance of students in schools through Google? Because that's what happened. Like,
Yes,
Okay,
actually,
and
no.
the
I'll just
expansion-
cop to this. I'll just cop to
and
this.
the
Yeah, those
expansion of
little
school
shits should be
shooters-
watched because kids are crazy, right? Those little
especially,
shits need to have an eyeballs on
In-
them, right? They're gonna get up
eyeballs
to
in the face of all
bullshit,
the
right?
face of all those school shootings. The entire surveillance state
Wouldn't
has
it
been
be nice if they
expanded.
were surveilled a little harder so we could catch those things?
What do you mean
Yes.
catch those things? We can't even catch them. We don't
Like if
even
they have a
catch them
doobie.
before.
Bro.
Like there, it's to the point now where the minute you go onto an educational campus in America in some parts of the country, you are being surveilled from the point you enter the door to all of your activities, even up to including the bathroom. And in the face of this, Republicans were
Deej
like,
nuts. Thank
we
you for
gotta-
the $10.
That's
Appreciate it.
illegal. That is illegal
It's
to
not
record in the
illegal.
bathroom. Yes, it is.
It's not illegal.
It is
You are
100%.
allowed to put cameras in bathrooms, so as long as the bathroom is in an open access point and that the stalls are not visible. So what they do is they put cameras in the entrance, not in the stalls themselves. That's what schools did when they tried to solve the trans panic problem. The trans panic problem was just put cameras in the entrance of bathrooms. Or
Okay,
they just
well,
don't put doors.
Okay,
I
real
mean,
quick.
first of all,
What's wrong with putting cameras in schools, and what does it have to do with trusting political parties?
Because those cameras are coming from corporations that have their own interests in making money. They're not.
What are we gonna
putting
make our
those
own?
What are the
cameras-
corporations doing
they're
with
not-
the cameras?
There it is. Thank you. Damn.
The corporations in the room right now.
It took me cooking to get to the point where, yes, somewhere in what you like, the reason why I'm talking the way I'm talking is because somewhere in what you believe, whether you want to admit it to it or not, you believe that we need corporations to solve these
Yeah, I'm a
particular
capitalist.
problems. Good. That's great. So you could have just said that like 20, 30 minutes ago.
I think literally everyone is a capitalist here but you.
That's
No, if you want to form a socialist party, go form
And
a socialist
also,
party. You're
on
free
the
to.
trans panic thing, the Christian right will be destroyed by the Democrats when we trans all the kids. First of all, that is the plan.
Your
Second
plans
of
have been
all,
put on hold,
I-
non-fun. It's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
You'll
And
see.
again,
We'll come
look,
back.
I have
We'll double it.
no qualms or reservations in what you believe. My frustration is that sometimes when we have these conversations, people don't necessarily understand like what exactly they're saying. Like, do you trust a company with the data of school age students, Bree? Because that's what
mean-
these contracts have. I can give you books for this if you'd like. If this is the first time you're ever
All right,
hearing this
so
information
there's-
before.
A legitimate conversation about what the proper role of technology should be in schools. There needs to be surveillance cameras in schools, for one, liability issues, because if something happens, I think everyone wants to know what happened. If there's an incident of teacher misconduct, if there is a severe incident with students fighting each other,
Or a shooting.
everyone wants to know about this stuff. It's kind of like police body cams. Like, we want there to be accountability for everyone. I think police should want body cams because it's like people say a lot of bullshit about what police do sometimes. Sometimes there is misconduct. With Google having things, I think we are in a more technological world. I didn't agree with the biggest push of let's give every single student in our district a Chromebook. I
Why?
think you can still get you can get a lot of information out to students that doesn't have to be like, use this device, let's play this Kahoot game on the screen, let's do XYZ. I mean, for the longest time, I still had teachers, and I'm 28, who used overhead projectors. We learned fine, right? There's ways we can get school in there. I don't think a student needs a Chromebook, but on cameras, we need cameras. The contracts may be exploitative of things. I have not looked into contracts. I'm not an administrator at my school. I am a teaching assistant. It's not a way above my pay grade. But
But still is
looked
part of
more
your
into them.
general right. So like that's why when I think of like student surveillance and educational surveillance, I think of companies like GoGuardian, where individuals are just like, again, these are full-on schools who are just totally fine with passing off the information of students to corporations, and then they can do with that information however they see fit. They can, like, these are books and devices. When I say books, I say Chromebooks. These are devices that are issued by the school, but the school does not have any way to privatize that information from that point. And that should be a concern as a parent. Like, it should be ideal. It should be beyond your ideology of like, hey, if you have this Chromebook, we can find you anywhere, and you don't even have to be on our network. Like, that's what happens. Like, when a child comes with a Chromebook and they connect their phone to their Chromebook to charge, you might be compromising that child's personal information. And parents do not know that. That is because of these type of contracts. And these are things that, unfortunately, Democrats and Republicans hide. So, like, when we talk about trustworthiness, those are the substantial things where it's like, I can't trust a school to have the best interest of privacy to the students in the school if I know they have a GoGuardian contract, if I know they have particular contracts to different things like Google and what have you, because they in the quest of trying of DEI and access and wokeism, they just signed off their rights, they signed off their freedoms, they signed off the privacy of their own kids. And then while Republicans are complaining about trans kids and complaining about sexual assault in schools, the rhetorical argument should be, hey, did you know that like a private company not affiliated with this school, the school that you signed off for, now has access to your information? Hey, let's work together on that and shut the fuck up about trans kids for a couple days.
I don't know if that would stop look, that's just such a, I understand the point, and there is a legit argument to be made on both sides here, because I think that there's legit arguments to be like, we should be monitoring kids more, and the fact that we haven't for so long has created so many problems, and is all these things, right? But there are pros and cons to all this. But the question at hand, right? If both parties are bad at a particular subject, that does not mean that both parties are bad at all subjects equally. And we can look at other subjects where I think that either the Republicans or the Democrats have clear benefits and clearly are more trustworthy. Like when we look at, I'll just say Ukraine, for example. I think that the Democrats are far, far better at Ukraine than the Republicans have been.
Wild.
They didn't hold Ukraine
in terms of trustworthiness.
Yeah, like look at what Tucker Carlson has been saying recently about how we're
how the Ukraine. Carlson?
Yeah, he's a Republican, is he not?
You're talking about Tucker. What the fuck does that fat fuck have to do with anything about Ukraine?
To be clear, you were talking about Big Camera for the last 5 minutes.
Is he an envoy or something? I mean, no, I'm being genuinely
serious. He's a big speaker for the Republican Party. What do you mean?
I mean, each side has media organizations that are like kind of affiliated with it. Do they not?
Tucker Carlson is unaffiliated, unless you want to make the argument that he's affiliated to the right.
He was a Fox News guy for how long? Come on.
Okay.
He lied about the 2020 election.
That's a big lie.
This is bullshit.
He spread the 2020 election.
What do you mean?
Yeah, like what are you talking about?
Make the connection. I've never heard any normal person bring up Tucker Carlson in a conversation about Ukraine. Like I understand he has strong opinions about Ukraine, but he's zero stakeholder in this. He could say Ukraine should be a golf course, and everyone's like, all right, Tucker, have fun with your YouTube channel, dumb fuck.
No, he just meets with the president of the United States.
I gotta jump in here, right? Like the reason that Tucker Carlson,
I agree. Tucker Carlson is a voice for the right or whatever. What specific claims? What specific claims do you have?
Well, no, I want to. Because Joe isn't the only person to have said, right? Why are we listening? Why do we care what these media influencers say? And I want to take a moment to explain. $5 from Lawson Harrison to say, what information of minors are we concerned about getting stolen into what EMD? Okay, we can talk about that soon. Thank you for the $5. But
was that the response to me?
I think that was
the book is, if you want to know the book, I'll put it in the side chat too. I did.
Please.
It's called Surveillance Education: Navigating the Conspicuous Absence of Privacy in Schools. It was written by Nolan Hidjon and Allison Butler.
Okay.
But if you want to see more about that, they've talked about there's multiple interviews online that you can look up as well.
But Tucker Carlson is a fairly influential figure to right-wing politics. Like, it isn't just politicians. When we talk about the Democrats, I'm not just talking about the people who hold office, whether it be at the local level, the state level, or the federal level. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm also talking about influencers. I'm also talking about the rank and file, the members of the Democratic Party, right? I'm talking about the apparatus that they have, right? Media apparatus, political apparatus, all
the Leviathan,
and
this thing that exists.
The Republicans have their version of it as well, and they have their influencers, their what's the word for that, right? They're influencers, they're rank and file, they're factions, same as the Democrats, right? So when we talk about that, Tucker Carlson is a major figure in that Republican apparatus. So when he goes to Russia and he interviews Putin and he says things, this has an influence on the Republican Party. It also has a negative, like it has an influence on the Democrats as well, but beyond the scope, right? There's some negative correlation, right?
Do you hold this position for Lex as well?
Yes. For all these influential features, from media matters on the left, right? The left has their Brian Tyler Cohen, their Kyle Kalinski's, their version, like Destiny until recently. And
speaking of cameras,
yeah,
I'm recording.
But you know, they all have these influencers, and they all actually matter in this. And I think that when it comes to Ukraine specifically, I trust that the Democratic Party is going to do better for the Ukrainian people than the Republican Party will, than Hegseth, than Trump. Have you guys seen the proposition that Hegseth laid out today? It's
wait, on what?
The proposed peace deal that they're going for, where NATO isn't even on the table for the Ukraine and that's just a non-starter.
What I agree with you with,
it's a non-starter.
Yes.
No. What they want. That's what they need. Yeah,
them being part of NATO is a non-starter.
They've been trying to join for how long?
Both parties don't want them to be in NATO. Both of them
joining NATO is a non-starter, right?
It's a non-starter for Democrats. It's a non-starter for Republicans.
Because Russia will not accept that.
And they both have invested interests, which involves, as Lactoid is describing, some level of Russia simping. Like both of them in their calculus interpret Ukraine joining NATO as confrontational to Russia. So what Democrats are more than happy to do is to just be like, hey, we're going to give you funds so you keep throwing your men to die. Like, because as long as you're killing Russians, we don't give a shit. Because we hate Russians, but we don't feel too strongly about sending troops to kill them. So we'll use your men and boys to kill them for us.
You don't think that they want to fight? You don't think that Zelensky said, hey, we will be the buffer, we will do it, like, because like nobody else will? Like, one of the big things that people say is...
Let him finish.
Careful,
Brandon, don't let him walk over you. Brandon, give your balls a
One of the big things that people say is, oh, we don't want NATO on our borders and stuff like that. You already have NATO on their borders. You already have the Baltics. You already have, is it Norway? You already have Finland. Like, there's already like 5 countries that border Russia. And why can't Ukraine be that as well? Why can't Ukraine join? What pisses Ukrainians off is the fact that Ukraine, or like Poland and the Baltics, were able to join NATO, and they have increased like tremendously. While Ukraine has not been allowed to join NATO, Ukraine was given security guarantees when they gave up their nukes, and their economy has not been able to increase anywhere near as much as Poland or the Baltics. They like, these countries do not want to rejoin Russia, but Russia wants to retake these countries.
So that's the pickle then, huh? So, like, if you're somebody who's sympathetic to Ukraine and think, like, let's just make it a really, like, specific policy thing. I believe that Ukraine should join NATO. And I'm looking at Democrats and I'm looking at Republicans. Who should you trust? Based on their actions.
Democrats, 100%. I mean, look at what Biden did. Yeah. Hold on. You were saying that Democrats have some Russian simping. Can you elaborate on that? Where's the Democrat Russian simping?
The fact that they don't want them to join NATO.
I think they're way more likely to want them to join NATO than Republicans.
Yeah,
we probably have European allies that don't want them to join NATO.
That's probably true.
Like, so
look at what it took to get Sweden and Finland in. Like, all the cajoling we had to do with Turkey to like get allies in, who everyone's like, yeah, that's fine, they can go. Not a big deal.
Here's one of
that's a conundrum for me. It's like when we talk about trustworthiness, for me, it's action. Based on the actions of both parties, if you are somebody who is the Ukraine NATO position, you should look at Democrats and think, well, they're not shit. You should look at Republicans and think they're not shit. But what makes Democrats dangerous in their caretaking of the expansion of Russia is that while they'll say, hey, we'll protect you with funds and money, they're still not going to do anything about the death of Ukrainian men and boys. Like Zelensky will gladly drop the conscription age so that younger boys can go out
He
there.
said
and
he's
fight.
not going to.
Okay, there's a whole point there.
Wait, you're right. You're right. He said he's not
There's
going
a-
to, but who was pressuring him to do that?
The Democrats, which means that they're more Ukrainian. They're more pro-Ukrainian.
Oh
They're
yeah.
more-
Wait. Dropping a conscription age from 25 to 18, forcing more kids to go into combat against their will. That's pro-Ukrainian.
If you want them
Sure.
not
For
give
18-year-old
up,
adults.
yeah.
Arguably, like,
If you don't want them to give up their own land, yes, they have sovereign land, and they've given up their sovereign land.
Yes, I'm sure a bunch of 18-year-olds really care about that. They really want to go and die against their will.
Hold on, in World War II, do you think that Americans really wanted to go fight the Nazis or fight the Japanese? Like, it's not whether they want to or not. It's about whether you have to protect your country or not.
Fam, respectfully, using World War II as that example is crazy work. Plus one.
It's a way more complicated. It's way more complicated.
$5 from Feder Methodist to say if Russia doesn't want NATO on their borders, they shouldn't be trying to move their borders closer to NATO. Thank you for the $5.
True.
So the thing that worries me, right, is that in the face of Vivek Ramaswamy posted this idea of freezing all territories. So just saying, we're going to stop and we're just going to reshape the land where it was at X date. And I've heard that, and I heard him say that, and I got nervous because all he needed was to pitch that to the right person, and that could have been easily Donald Trump's foreign policy plan. He's alluded to that from time to time too, by the way. And
probably what he's
Wait. Freezing the territories? What are you talking about?
He supported a Ukrainian surrender, and the Ukrainian surrender involved a ceasefire from both sides and a territorial freeze. So basically reshaping Ukraine to the borders where the currently land is held, and then just conceding a loss on one side, whether that be Ukrainians or Russians. It's for them to decide who declares to be the loser of the conflict, and they both move on.
So what would you like to see happen?
That is, hold on real quick. That is the best, most realistic outcome from the pro-Ukrainian side at this point.
Right.
I've been following this closely, right?
Yeah.
The Ukrainians are losing, and they've been consistently losing over the past many months. There's really two options here: come to a peace agreement, or potentially have the entire country at risk. That's it.
And I think the problem that certain situations present themselves is when we talk about trust, because I bring that up because of trust. When you have certain positions, you trust that politicians will move in a way so that those positions could be realized in their actions. And I'd love to hear how Democrats and the Democratic Party are moving in a way to support the self-determination of Ukrainians, supporting them joining NATO. Because it seems
I'll give you a real easy example that in general Democrats are far more supportive than Republicans in arming, sending not only old military equipment but money to to Ukraine than Republicans are. That is one reason when we talk about supporting their right to self-determination, one of the ways they do that is by funding and arming them. And that is something the Democrats have
that's kind of a new thing, too.
Well,
that's kind of a new thing. That was not the case before.
But think about how that sounds, right? We support Ukrainians in arming themselves and self-determining themselves by self-defense. We're not going to do anything proactive on their behalf, but we're going to give them guns. We're going to give them equipment that they need, which then ties back to my point that
there have been Democrats, I think Walz did this as well as Shapiro. There might be more. I'm not sure if Fetterman did it or not, but they've called for the NATO or the U.S. establishment of a no-fly zone over Ukraine.
That is crazy.
I don't know if Russia. I don't know. I'm sorry.
That is completely unhinged.
Republicans have, but when we talk about
shooting down Russian planes, that's
like we did in Turkey, right? We've done that before.
I've heard,
this isn't new.
The reason.
Yeah, there's a difference between having a no-fly zone over a NATO ally as opposed to Ukraine, which is a current active war
in Syria specifically.
Right, respectfully.
Are you talking about Syria? Yes, that's also insane. But that's,
the thing,
we've done it, and no one's gone World War III.
We did not shoot down any Russian planes in Syria.
Is that any solution for Democrats
NATO
in this conversation, in this particular context of trustworthiness, is we trust Democrats because at least they're going to kill some Russians. And at least our Americans don't have to die when we kill some Russians.
You think it's more so that we want them to kill Russians than we want Ukraine to have sovereign territory protected? I mean, like,
is there a way that they have sovereign territory protected without them throwing men in a conflict just to kill Russians?
Not really. Look at what happened in 2014 with Crimea and the civil war that followed on after that.
Why did that happen?
If there was a civil war, or if there was a ceasefire, sorry, what is to say that that Russia won't attack them again in 2 to 3 years if they don't join NATO? Like, how can you protect? How can you protect Ukraine if there's no?
What's more valuable? Making sure that Ukrainian men have the ability to externalize their freedom to be with their families as they see substantively fit, or killing as many Russians as possible?
I mean, I would say obviously the first one, but that's not. These aren't the two options, really. It's either they fight or they don't, and they lose their country.
So why would we? So who's deciding that they're in that position?
I think everyone with half a brain knows that that's the position that they're in.
Who put them in that position, though?
Russia.
Russia, when they invaded
Russia put them in that
Ukrainian
position.
territory.
Yes.
And Democrats and the United States have no involvement in influencing Ukrainians' choice in this matter?
Do you think that the CIA overthrew or did a coup? I'm curious.
Do you think there was not a coup?
Not by the U.S. No, I don't think the CIA.
Was there an internal? Was there an internal coup?
Yes, for sure.
Did they break their own constitution?
Maybe.
Why do we expect the Crimeans to have to live with that?
Because they
why have we been sold this? Why this
Lactoid,
is the problem.
we're going to have a
no. We were planning on that, but that's been indefinitely extended, it seems. Okay, I think this is relevant. I'm going to make it relevant to the topic. We don't have to fall into the specifics of this, okay? I'm just going to make this general point. The general point being, I think that Americans, disproportionately by the Democratic Party, but not entirely, have been sold this view as to what's been happening in Ukraine since 2014 that is just false. And the view and the facts that they've been sold have led them to become somewhat contradictorily, at least historically speaking, these jingoist maniacs. We got to give them everything.
Maniacs.
We got jingoist.
I'm going to say genocidal maniacs.
Okay, that's true. I'm going to say jingoist. I think that when you talk to people like the Ukraine brains, they will look you in the eye and say, give Ukraine everything they want. Some of them are like, let's establish a no-fly zone, U.S. boots in the ground. I've had people say this. Yeah, this is, you want to drag. So first of all, you want to drag us into a war, a serious war against a modern conventional power based on a history in which we're not really the good guys. Yes, conventional. They are conventional military. Yes,
they're losing way more people
and
than
Ukraine are far more. They are on a moral high ground compared to the Russians, and I will back that up.
You said you don't want to talk about the details right now, so I'm not going to get into the details.
Look at the lies. Do you believe in the biolabs?
We will have a discussion.
No, but that's another.
I'll set up a debate with this next week.
Great,
we can pick a day.
This is the concern.
But let me just. Yeah. So you just said the biolab. This is another. This actually, I got a list here. We can go through it at the end or whatever. I got a list here.
Or selling the weapons to the cartels.
Prominent Democrat lies. Okay, well, we don't know where all that fucking money went, but. Prominent Democrat lies.
We're watching it.
The biolabs. Did Tulsi Gabbard say anything false about the biolabs in Ukraine? Just standing here today, do you believe that Tulsi Gabbard said anything false about the biolabs in Ukraine?
I'm not exactly sure what she said about the biolabs in Ukraine.
I mean, well, look, it was enough for Hillary Clinton to call her a Russian agent. It was enough for
the Russians do really like Tulsi Gabbard, to be fair.
So she's an asset of the Russians?
I never said that.
Well, hold on. You didn't say that. Hillary Clinton said it.
And Hillary Clinton is one of the pillars of the DNC establishment.
Yes.
Even though her involvement is not directly within the DNC, when she speaks, people listen. The same way that Michelle Obama, Jimmy Carter to a lesser extent because now he's dead in the dirt, but yeah.
To this day, a large contingent of the Democratic Party believes that Tulsi Gabbard argued that Ukraine and the U.S. were funding biolabs to target Russian genes or whatever the fuck. This is nothing, like Tulsi said, nothing of the sort. You can find her video on this. Everything she said was 100% accurate. Everything that she called for was 100% accurate. But you still have a large contingent of people, despite the fact that she went through how many security checks. You have people thinking, like arguing that she's a Russian asset when it comes to her getting a position here as the DNI director. Like, again, let me ask, do you guys think that this is at least dishonest to say that Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian asset without any evidence?
I don't know if the only evidence was the her
I have
comments on
looked.
the biolabs in Ukraine.
I have
Wasn't
looked.
it?
There has been almost
I haven't
no
done
evidence.
research into Tulsi Gabbard, so my understanding, she has met with both like Hezbollah officials, which she has later praised Hezbollah officials, and then I think she also met
Assad.
with some Russian officials. I don't remember
No,
what year. Then.
so she never
met
went to
with
Russia.
Assad,
She did have a meeting with Assad that
Mhm.
she got criticism for. I thought her comments on the Assad interview were relatively benign. I actually agree with her that we should probably know for a fact what's going on, especially in the Middle East, before we start firing rockets. I don't think this makes somebody a Russian asset. I definitely don't think it clearly gives. I don't think it gives somebody enough evidence to declare somebody's a Russian asset. But you still have a significant portion of the Democrats openly saying this to this day.
So what I'm
Pretty
seeing
fucked.
is she said she talked about the existence of dozens of U.S.-funded biolabs working on some of the world's nastiest pathogens, and then
Which is
Russia
true.
claimed, that that they were using it to target their own people. So I'm not going to say that what she said was like not true, but I mean it's like, why would you even need to say that? It's not necessarily Russian propaganda, but I mean it's.
No, I'll
it's
tell
like,
you why she said it. I'll tell you why she said it. Why she said it was because COVID was in very recent memory. It had just it was still happening. It had just started. And you have these, yes, US funded biolabs, which hold pathogens. And a war broke out. And she was saying, I'm calling for a ceasefire around these biolabs so they don't get hit by munitions and potentially expose more pathogens. Reasonable statement, especially in the context of COVID. And
Fair enough,
you,
I guess, but
yes,
I mean-
yes, and this is fair enough. And look, you're as an honest actor, I know that you know this is fair enough. Why couldn't Hillary Clinton?
Because she's bought and paid for by elites, and she has her
Maybe
own
because she actually
individual
believes
agenda.
that she's a Russian agent. Is that
No,
a possibility?
No,
is that a
because
possibility?
no,
It's
being
theoretically possible.
Being American
disprove
means you are in some level of confrontation against Russia.
I will just
But
say that
broader than
McConnell
that-
didn't trust Tulsi and voted against her today.
Yeah, well, McConnell
And
can
is
barely
McConnell
trust him
bought and
keeping
paid
his
for by
shit in his
Clinton?
asshole for
Right.
15 minutes. Like, that motherfucker's got to retire. I
At
don't
least
care what that-
McConnell will somewhat fight against Trump. That's something I'll gotta
What's he
give him
gonna do?
credit
Is he gonna do
for.
this? Is this how he's gonna fight? Oh,
No,
yeah,
I'm
let's put
saying
his-
he'll stand
he's
up
gonna need
against
5
him and
A's to put his
say and
hands
call
up?
Trump bad when he does bad shit.
Yeah,
He
calling
holds
Trump
Trump's
calling Trump bad is like calling a dog outside from the rain wet. It's like doesn't do anything. You got to fucking make sure the dog dries. Something that's really interesting here is there is some agreement, especially within the Democratic side of the corner. Like, you guys, in some capacity, want corporate interests to be protected, and you at least have admitted in your language that both parties are reliable in that regard. In this case, you seems like you believe that Democrats are more reliable in protecting corporate interests. And I guess the question for me, or I guess the thing that's kind of interesting, is that then when you sort of flip the script and talk about like addressing systemic issues, wealth inequality, healthcare, they both failed. They both failed in unique ways. But I think the thing that I hope you guys can sort of consider is that should we trust corporations with our own interests? Like, should we trust oligarchs, the Elon Musks, the
Yes.
Mark Zuckerbergs, the Metas of the world with our interests?
I mean,
And it seems to be
if by
it seems to
corporate
be that,
interest
like,
you're
go
just
for it.
basically referring to capitalism, then like,
No,
yeah, I'm gonna.
I mean, like, if you've been online for like 5 minutes and just only engage with FT signifier videos, I guess you can come to that conclusion that everything's just going to boil down to capitalism. No, like, these parties are beholden to particular interests that are outside of the political apparatus and have influence. So
I got a question for you. Do you think that both parties are controlled by corporate interests? Just out of curiosity.
Their interests are different. I spoke to it before. Oligarchs want the privatization of all goods and services. Corporatists believe in the placeholding of investments long term for gains down the road. So they'll make long-term investments instead of short terms, and then rely on those long-term investments as justification as to why we ought to keep moving forward.
I will say, I do respect the billionaire class because I believe that they probably have put some pressure on Trump to not do the insane tariffs the way he wants to do,
What
and
does that
to
look
not
like
to not.
exactly?
I mean, if you're, I mean,
Well,
I'm sure.
Trump got something out of those tariff threats, by the way. Come on, we can't say he didn't.
Well, sure. I mean, well, so we can talk about this later, okay, Lactoid. But to the extent that Trump wants to do tariffs, I think I think Trump did not get super meaningful concessions out of Colombia or Canada. I think he did get something out of Mexico.
And definitely Panama. I mean, they're leaving Belt and Road because of the threats.
I haven't read about Panama yet. Maybe you're right, but
wait, hold on. He didn't threaten to tariff Panama.
No, he threatened to invade, which happened to be very
different
effective.
thing.
Wait, I thought no new wars.
And they left the Belt and Road initiative
hold on.
Trump's...
No new wars against people that we could potentially have to spend money and people fighting. Panama.
So just to be sure,
I could conquer Panama. I mean, Jesus Christ! It's no real enemy. It's we could walk up there 5 people. Come on, no problem.
I love y'all, but think about what I said. Okay, do you think if you're making a long-term investment, an investment that you might not see the return on in 10 to 20 years, do you think you give a fuck about a steel tariff right now in 2025 No, you don't care.
I mean,
if you're making a long term,
I think people care about the steel tariffs. Yeah.
No, I'm saying
there is actually evidence of this, that uncertainty around trading policies actually does depress investment even in the short term. And I do also think the billionaire class supports an independent Federal Reserve and not a politically controlled one, and probably don't want Trump to mess with the Federal Reserve at all.
It's so cool when I say something and then it's just, well, actually something I read on Twitter. So
this is something there's like meta-analysis about this.
If I am making a
Did you get that from Twitter, Non-Fawn?
I didn't. I got it from the Tax Foundation. They have a whole list of stuff.
From a link on Twitter. Isn't that right? That's what I thought. Yeah.
No, from like Queen Erica York.
If I am making long-term investments as a corporation, sure, maybe in the immediate, a 10% tariff here and there might pose a problem. But again, these are long-term investments. So you look at the investment over the entire scope of it. If you are a corporation and you are freaking out about the fragility of your investment in Trump tariffs in 2025, where you won't see the returns of it until like 2035 or 2050, then that's not a worthy investment to be making. And that's not good business. But we're not talking about these like brand new people with economics degrees. We're talking about billionaires.
This is just not true. And I'll tell you why. Right?
I don't care about the particulars of this. My point still.
Let's not get into the weeds, guys. Let's not get into the weeds.
The particulars matter.
I don't care.
Instead of engaging with the point, you want to try so hard to just simp for a corporation.
It's not
okay. You can just say that.
What the fuck, Wick?
You believe that corporations and their long-term investments create stability in this country.
Prices for me go up, right? When I'm trying to buy a product that I want that is made by these resources,
oh my
they
God.
go up. And so, it matters to me. I don't want to pay more.
You're not a corporation, Wick. You're not a corporation. You don't have investments.
Will raise the price
he is. He's with the corporation.
Wick TV, brother.
While you're complaining about the cost of steel as a small business owner, that person who bought that shit out years ago is like, all right, whatever. We still have a stockpile. It's still sitting here.
Right? Wick, what's your response to that?
Because
no response.
Small businesses matter. They're drivers of industry and growth. And if we want upward mobility in America, right? If we want upward mobility in America, we have to make it so that more than just the big corporations with huge stockpiles can afford to invest in resources to build the products in the cheapest, most efficient way possible. That's why tariffs hurt small business. They hurt consumers. They hurt America.
Ooh.
And that's why
were Democrats
because
smart
you like corporate interests, Wick.
Yeah, like were Democrats smart in grooming my entire generation to be beholden to banks?
True.
Do you think? Hold on. Do you think Democrats groomed your generation to be beholden to banks?
We are in a student loan crisis because politicians groomed us into relying to banks to get the money for homes.
And who
because
tried
you
fixing
want to know
that?
what Obama
Who tried
said?
helping with that?
Because homes would be free otherwise. Like, what the fuck?
Who tried to?
Bill Clinton said straight the fuck up, I cannot guarantee you a home, but I can guarantee you the opportunity to get a home. These motherfuckers have been grooming us for banks as early as the 90s. And then when all these people, some of them have never even engaged in the private sector, in the private banking sector.
How do you think we got a home? People went through a bank. That's why redlining was a problem.
No, that's not what happened at all, Wick. That was before
the VA says
that was before Bill Clinton.
The VA says, "What's up?" like I don't know what you want me to say here. Like, yes, banks,
it was all
private
free
banks in
back
particular, did shady shit to majority non-white communities. That goes without saying. But the point still remains because they don't care about racialized policy and picking apart the blacks in the 90s. They were thinking umbrella. We're trying to give as many people opportunity as possible. But hey, let's make sure these people get strong loans, good loans, so they can use that money they get on the loan to buy a home, to maybe go to school for an education. And then when they build those skills for an education, they can come back and get a job. Guess what? The jobs weren't fucking there. And then instead of like, oh, the problem is the problem is the job market and how we created an infrastructure and institution around jobs and education, they just said the answer was more education. So go back for your master's, go back for your PhD. Keep giving money to banks. And then all the while you had a housing crisis in the backdrop. And this affected my generation. The 2000s to 2010s are fucked generationally because of the incompetence of Democrats and Republicans. The only difference between Republicans is that they still believe in some level of hard work in the face of all this debt. So they have a whole different can of worms to deal with.
Republicans
Democrats will look at your debt and say, well, there's nothing we can do about it because you made that choice. And we don't want to engage with these private institutions
Joe,
that
do you understand?
Propelled American people.
I want to be very clear with this, right? Like that today, right? In the last 5, I'll extend it to 10 years, has been the people in America have been the wealthiest that they've ever been. They've had more opportunities than they've ever had in the history of the fucking world, okay? Has been in America, right? And I think that, like, while there are problems and there are issues and not everything's perfect and sunshine and roses, and I would never say that they were, that we overplay our hand when we say that we are beholden to banks in a way that's unique to any other time in history. It's just not true. And in fact, I would say that we have more ability to go and get income outside of education, right? Than we ever have.
Wick is controlled by corporate interests. This is why he's saying
$5 from Deej Nuts to say tariffs protect local businesses who struggle to outsource as easily as the larger corporations, for example, small businesses. Deej, that's not true. We can debate it sometime that tariffs do not protect local businesses.
Wick.
I'll debate anyone on it. Anyone, send them my way. Okay.
Do you think people should have had some type of housing program like the VA loan?
VA loans are good.
Sure. But do you think that could have been expanded?
It could have been, yes.
So why did we give it to service members, in your opinion? Like, why did we say that, hey, because of your service to this country...
It's an incentive to sign up. We needed service.
Sure.
One of the reasons.
Why can't we expand that to other things?
Who do you think would be more likely to support that? Just curious.
That people will support that.
No,
I think
party?
Anybody.
I
don't
retarded.
Oh like that was crazy to ask. Like the simple premise is this. I have an answer. The simple premise is this. Ideologically speaking, if you went to a person who is poor and said, "Hey, if you work this job for 10 years, we'll give you a home." The ideology doesn't matter.
They're
There's
poor.
not a single person on the planet. who would be like, well, you know,
True.
because of the Republican, I don't really agree. No.
Yes.
Nobody's thinking
Republicans
about
would
their
not support that at
ideology.
all.
No one's thinking of their ideology as a Republican if the politician said, hey, in this program, after 10 years of loyalty to your company, we'll guarantee you a home. Or better yet, by consistent employment, where you consistently work for X amount of hours per week, per month, you continually have a base salary and you're paying taxes, then you'll have a home regardless of your situation. There's not going to be some ideological rift in the ocean. People don't have homes. People have poor jobs. And if we can find ways, unique ways, to incentivize things like home ownership, like dealing with the alleviation, the agitations that people
which
have.
Which party do you think is more likely to do that?
Wait,
Democrats or Republicans?
Republicans would never support this at all.
You go this idea that like it'll never support this at all. You know what we didn't support at all for a while? Black people having rights, women having rights, people being gay in America.
Anything's possible. Like, you can't deny that. Anything's possible.
You do this idea that like, well, if nothing is possible because we have, like, yeah, it's because
free homes.
One of the things that you have to do in politics is not get into this ideological gatekeeping bullshit and recognize that people are more aligned to the class that they are and their conditions in the community more than anything else. And one of the things that Democrats, y'all especially, are just cucking yourselves into years of Republican leadership is not engaging with people on their material conditions. You guys are civilians, so it's like you're irrelevant in the larger.
I will agree with you that the Democrats are fucking it up,
especially if you're in a swing
messaging,
state.
Especially in what they're choosing to engage with, what they're not. I agree with you. Democrats are fucking it up. We need to do better, right? But when it comes to like, who do I trust to do better?
You have to bring things to the table. That's what brings trust, Wick. You have to bring substantive things to the table for people to trust you. It's no more, you can't use words anymore. You lost with words under Clinton. You lost with words under Biden. You lost with words under Harris. No, people are starving. People are dying.
Won.
I do want to mention.
Yes, Clinton won, and he ushered in a balanced budget.
Oh, Clinton! Bill Clinton won.
Yeah,
I'm
Bill.
talking about his bitch, Hillary. You know, two-time loser. Like,
okay.
Oh no!
Hey,
Squad
Clinton
W.
should never have ran in 2016.
Send me to the Hague? Like,
I'm not gonna. I'm not one of these, wimpy lefties. Okay, they want to police your language, not me. But I did want to ask.
At the end of the day,
let's not pretend you guys haven't been saying that for so long.
Y'all are fucking losers.
They're losers.
And then when we're talking about trust,
and Trump was a loser when he lost in 2020.
And when you talk about Trump was
he was just a delayed winner.
Who cares?
It's a delayed winner. That's all it is.
He has 2 terms to look at you and go, I'm going to fuck up this country for 8 years. You didn't get that for Joe Biden, did you? No, because you cooed his ass. Damn.
We got it for 12 years. We got Obama, and then Obama.
So hold on, you bitch about how he's incompetent to lead, and then when they kick him out,
it's 3 terms, motherfucker.
Yes, literally.
3 terms.
It's literally a coup, but
literally a coup.
Okay. Real quick.
Wait, I agree with all the coup shit.
Political parties can do what they want.
To be fair, neither of us have talked all that much, but go ahead.
$5. $5 from
this
Portland
one.
is burning to say I own a small business and the only way I can be competitive is to almost exclusively import products from China. Thank you for $5. Non-fun, go.
Okay, that is true. Tariffs are bad. Just real quick, because this annoys me, and I argue with my fellow entitled Gen Zers about this, okay? Even using CPI, which I think is a deflator that overestimates inflation, only looking at market income, so excluding government transfers, Gen Z and millennials still have like the highest earnings compared to their parents at the same age. So that just...
And then there's a statistic that goes directly with that Black Americans are more likely to inherit the wealth of their grandparents than the wealth of their parents. So fuck a statistic. like, I don't know what you want me to say there, friend.
That. Fuck the statistics.
Like, yeah, I can pick.
This is what happens, non-fun, when you just bring shit off Twitter.
My message too. Of
I wanted to ask a serious question though, Joe.
Yeah.
A lot has been said. You really can't wrap your brain around the idea that some people might oppose the free house for everyone project.
The thing for me is that if there are things that you believe in, things that you want in this world, that is where your energy should be. That is where your political energy should be. That could be with a particular movement. That could be with a particular organization. That could be with a particular coalition of people within your area. People need to
Within
get
the
more
political party?
involved. People need to get more involved in the things that they care about. But the concern that I've always had, especially in this particular moment, is that in the face of all of these issues, people don't even know what they even value in the first place. So when we talk about trustworthiness, there's this very ambiguous idea of trust. Ideologically, is it trust when it comes to action? I've clearly articulated that the trust for me, trust comes from action based on the things that I value. But based on some of y'all's answers, I don't even think that's the case. Like, I'm being energized to bait out certain things I think you all believe. And I hate doing that because it's a really toxic trait, and I'm sorry. But it's okay to stand on the things that you value. And it's even okay to admit that you have no idea what you value. And that, like, because of the two-party nature of it all, you allude to this idea that, oh, this particular party, the Democrats in this case, are more trustworthy, they're more morally righteous, they're more ethical. But then when the rubber hits the road, when you run into the Lactoids, myself, even skeptical individuals like Addison Gills, you don't know how to like fully realize these ideas of what you're observing. And that's a concern that I have. And I think that for people watching, the answer to that is get involved, read more, and try to understand what you value and really understand what you value. Like,
Sure.
It's okay to have like a vague understanding of that. But if you only leave it like, I care about education, you're kind of just a waste of time to me, because unless you can like substantively say, what is it within education that you care about, then you are just at the whim of whatever somebody says that feels good to you in the moment. And that's dangerous if we know that both of these parties are untrustworthy.
I'll give you three things I value. Okay, and then we do have to wrap it up. Unfortunately, we're getting to the closings, and based on you guys' talkative natures, it's going to take us a while. But I'll give you the three I value. Okay, I value Pax Americana, American hegemony from sea to shining sea across the globe. I want us to be the unipolar leader of the free world. What does that mean? It means that when America says something, people fucking listen. When people don't fuck with us, right? People don't fuck with our trade routes. People don't fuck with our interests abroad. People don't fuck with us at home. That's what I want. That's what I value. That's
so
one.
Panama and Greenland, right?
Two. Another thing I value. Well, that's important because we've signed papers and we've signed agreements, and going back on our word, like with Panama specifically, it lessens people's ability to trust us in this world, and that's why I'm opposed to what Trump's doing there.
What are they going to do?
Second thing, right, is I value free speech. Right, I value a administration that doesn't kick out the Associated Press from the press pool because they refuse to use Gulf of America and want to use Gulf of Mexico instead. That's what I value. I value a administration that doesn't sue polling places, right, that have polls that they don't like just because it makes them look bad, right? Like Ann Seltzer, Trump suing Ann Seltzer. I value an administration that doesn't try to make burning an American flag illegal with punishment in prison, right, for up to a year. That's what I value. And the third value that I have, right, is I value honesty. And while Democrats have failed me on this, I'll cop to that. Democrats have failed me on this. Trump has failed worse, frankly. And that's what I value. But gang, it's been a show. It's been great. We've had a talk, okay? We've had a discussion, and we've gone all sorts of places. And I want to give each of these lovely individuals, and I have links to all their stuff in my YouTube description. Please check them out. A chance to tell people where you can find them, and also closing thoughts on the matter at hand. And if you enjoyed this, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. There won't be a show tomorrow, but on Friday, for Valentine's Day, I'm inviting Wix women, okay? All of them. All 5 of them.
That's
and
crazy.
we will be having Dr. Wix Lonely Hearts Hospital, where we will give you the medicine you need. You can call in and we'll hype you up, basically. It'll be fun. So call in and something a little more relaxed than this. It'll be fun to do. Lactoid, I see. You should call in, Lactoid. You need the hype.
That is so. I'm sorry.
You need the hype.
I know. I have opinions about that. That is.
Do you?
I've got. Yeah, I do.
What are your opinions?
I
it's
think
a little,
that male
it's a little
streamers need to
sad.
take. I think male streamers need to take a break in being in Discord calls with women. I think they need about a 90-day pause until we figure out what the fuck is going on.
Okay, I promise you'll never see any tapes of me ever.
What if the
exist.
5 women can't figure out anything nice to say about you? That would have the opposite effect, wouldn't it?
Damn.
Sure, but I trust these women not to be like that. Let's give the mic to Addison Gillis
Trust?
first, and then we'll end with we'll let Joe Lewis have the last word. Addison, tell people who you are, your thoughts. Go ahead.
Yes, you can find me on X. Closing thoughts. There was a Democratic strategist. He hired a focus group. He wanted to see how they felt about the two parties. So he just had them draw a symbol of each party. For the Republicans, they drew a dollar sign, and they were like, "Oh, that's great. Republicans are greedy." For Democrats, they drew a question mark because they have no idea what Democrats are for. And I think the reason for this is that traditionally, we've been a liberal capitalist society, and Republicans have always been angsty about the liberal side of that. Democrats have been angsty about the capitalist side of that. That's changing, though. I think Trump is negatively polarizing people against tariffs, and traditional Democratic voters are becoming more free market. And that's going to create tension with some members of the Democratic coalition, which is why I think it's time to start rethinking things. That's all.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks.
Brianna, please.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about a lot of things. I kind of just want to say, like, at the end of the day, we are a two-party system. We have the government style that we have. At the end of the day, it is a choice between two separate political movements. Who you trust, I think, partly does come down to policy preferences, and then again comes down to, I think, what I said earlier about seeing enough people from a broad enough spectrum who you believe are doing things that they believe are right. They are advocating for a vision. I think there are enough politicians like that on the left. I do not see that on the political right. I don't really stream, but you can find me anywhere at Bree Lives on pretty much everything. So,
okay, well, thank you for being here. Appreciate you. Brandon, go ahead.
You can find me at _ BrandonS101 on Twitter, and maybe I'll start streaming more on Twitch at twitch.tv/BrandonS101. I think it's funny that for the most part, nobody was able to say that Republicans were more trustworthy. It was all about how Democrats were more trustworthy, and we had to debate that. I think it's also interesting that you might not trust it, but PolitiFact says that Republicans are 3 times more likely to say false claims, and this was in 2013. Guarantee it's gotten worse. Versus a majority of Democrat statements, 54%, were rated as mostly true or entirely true, compared to only 18% of Republicans. If you care about healthcare, then you should care about Obamacare. And Trump saying he saved it, which isn't true. It was McCain. He claims that he saved pre-existing conditions. He didn't. That would have been removed. So I'm not saying Democrats are perfect, but it's obvious that Republicans tell way more lies. They push Russian propaganda, all that stuff. So yeah.
Okay, thanks for being here. Non-fun.
I guess the last thing I'll add, we talked a bit about banks, but not enough about the central bank, okay? If Kamala would have won, I have like 99% confidence she would not have done anything to mess with the central bank, okay? One of America's great institutions. With Donald Trump, I don't have that confidence, okay? I do not trust him not to politically interfere with the Fed. I think that's indicative of most of the things Trump does. If you like what I had to say, stream on YouTube at NonFon. There's a lot of edited debates up there, some with Lactoid in some of them, Wick is in some of them. NonFon 420 on Twitch or Kick. Go check me out.
NonFon 420. Great. Check him out. No, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. Thank you. Lactoid. Are you streaming after this, Lactoid?
No.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to go through my closing. So bear with me. Okay. I agree that like we talked a lot about the Democrats, but to be fair, for a lot of this discussion, I didn't know where the fuck we were. We were kind of all over the place. So I don't even really know how to close this out. But I'm just going to go through. I'm going to go through this some lies that I think are a big deal. And the only reason I'm going to go through this because We heard some of the right-wing lies, some of the Republicans, what they said that was wrong. So I think it's only fair, I think maybe even to chew on, for us to consider some of the left-wing lies before we come to some kind of conclusion as to who is the biggest liar. For years, the Democratic Party was looking at you right in the eye, saying that Biden was sharp when he wasn't. They said that your vote mattered in the primary. It didn't. They misrepresented the fact that Tim Walz signed a bill that allowed abortion for any reason or no reason all the way up until the day of birth in Minnesota. That was denied during the campaign, and turned out that is absolutely the case. I can go through that law with anybody who doesn't believe me. The Very Fine People lie, that was fact-checked by these fact-checking organizations, but of course, they only really care about that when it's on their side, because even after that was fact-checked by Snopes, you still had Biden and Kamala go up there on stage and repeat the Very Fine People lie. The lab leak being verified false, people were being banned for that on social media. It turns out that that's the most likely explanation, according to our FBI and CIA. Tulsi Gabbard being a Russian agent, turns out that was also a lie. I'm never going to pardon Hunter Biden. Look how that turned out. Hunter Biden was pardoned despite many, many statements to the contrary. The Hunter Biden laptop being Russian disinformation, that turned out to be false as well. And then even today, maybe it's a little bit unfair. I didn't know the closing was going to be in this order, just to be clear. But some of the things that were stated that Republicans lied about, they actually didn't, right? So if we're talking about FEMA, there were certain things the Republicans were saying about FEMA that turned out to be true. Namely, during the hurricane response, that Republicans were being denied
certain things.
I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. Yes. And the Democrats were lying about it. And it turns out that Republicans were being unfairly discriminated in some instances from receiving aid. The Hunter Biden stuff, again, absolutely was the case that the Hunter Biden laptop was not Russian disinformation, and that he did get pardoned despite promises to the contrary. And then Benghazi, I mean, that's an opinion about whether or not you think Hillary Clinton did enough. That's not really a claim as to whether or not she was factually correct or not. So I think overall, and by the way, more things I'm going to say because I'm going to keep talking. Some people will point to these studies or these reviews. Hey, look, XYZ percentage. And while I think that it's laudable to try to look at things in a scientific manner this way, go ahead and take a look at the methodology as to a lot of these studies. I haven't obviously gone through every single one, but the ones that I have gone through, they are structured in a way that would appear to be biased. Because when we're talking about who lies more, depends what topics. So, for example, there was one German study that found something similar. That, look, Trump supporters are going to lie more. But then when you look at the topics, it wasn't questions about abortion. It wasn't, other kind of questions that left-wingers tend to be more misrepresentative on. Instead, it was questions about things like climate change, right? It was questions that were aimed towards the kind of misinformation that right-wingers are more likely to believe in. So even believing these studies is a problem. And of course, and then they're claiming them, the lies to be more egregious. How the fuck do you rate a lie as more or less egregious? I think that what they did with Biden is extraordinarily egregious. Some people might disagree. Some people might say, well, that's not that egregious. They lied about his mental state or whatever for so many years and, denigrated her for his report or whatever. But I don't think it's that big of a deal. How am I supposed to tell you what you should or shouldn't care more about? It's a ridiculous standard. So all this to say that, in my opinion, if I had to pick one, I don't trust the Democrats more than I trust the Republicans, okay? But I don't trust either of them more than I think anybody who is willing to research and go through any statement they read on the internet. So for God's sake, if you see a meme, look it up.
Retweet that shit
and
immediately.
See if it's true. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Engagement.
Corporate interests. Okay. And anyway, I could keep going on, but you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube.
Okay, thanks for being here. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Again, for those of you who don't know who I am, I get rises out of people, and I speak in such a way usually to try to get rises out of people. So don't interpret any type of hyperbole or push to be something how I feel about you as a person. It's just kind of how I, weed some shit out. Is it the best way going about it? I don't know. Clearly it's killing me. The darkness is consuming my soul. Something that came to mind here is I think that people have a very incomplete idea of trustworthiness. And for me, at least, I think trustworthiness includes action, and not only just any type of action, but action relative to what you value. I'll give you an example of that. While I understand why Democrats are in support of the Fed, I believe the Fed's got to go. I believe that the Fed exists outside of direct democratic control and is just a proxy for banks and private banking institutions to deal with what they do as they see fit. That's coming from sort of, and my conclusion of this comes from understanding Hegel. It's not coming from an understanding of what rights and conservatives are saying. However, there's a problem with that. Because although I have aspirations for the removal of the Fed, I think that this is a perfect opportunity to go across ideological spectrums, libertarians, socialists, anarchists to an extent, communists if you want to rope them in, all types of ilk, political ideology. The rubber still hits the road of coming down to when we build this coalition of people against the Fed, there's going to need some type of focus and action. And the trustworthiness for me would be in that focus of action. So in my eyes, if we're talking about trustworthiness, Democrats are clearly not going to get rid of the Fed anytime soon because they're capitalist in nature. Republicans don't want to get rid of the Fed anytime soon because they're capitalist in nature. And those that do want just the privatization of these things that I believe are very important, like the state being the embodiment of ethical life. So when we're looking at people who are trying to go about the things that we want, it's deeper than what they say. It's very easy, as we've seen with the Harris campaign, to just say something and then people just insert their values, insert their morals, insert their ideology in the vapidness of that woman's rhetoric. But it gets a little bit more difficult when you have to pin down, so what are you going to do in the face of this thing that we agree on? And that's the part where I think trust comes in, where if somebody's able to articulate the thing, that identify the problem, do action against that problem, and then come with results against that problem, substantively against it, then that's something that is trustworthy. And that needs to be a consistent action. Trustworthiness for me are consistencies of actions, not sort of this moral and personal ethical feel. I think it's kind of unreflective to do things like that. And I hope that people, when they think about trustworthiness of politicians, kind of reframe it of really answering those sort of tougher questions about that, of what is trust? Do I trust corporations and the interests of corporations? Do I trust that these people are going to exude what I value? What exactly does it mean to say if I trust Democrats? What does it mean when I trust Republicans? I think that is something that's incomplete for a lot of people. I think the panel demonstrated that. I think it's a good opportunity for people who are watching to kind of explore that question for themselves.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Thank everyone for being here. Don't remember, like and subscribe. We're gonna rate out 2 different places. On YouTube, we're gonna rate into Visora Official, and then on Twitch, we're gonna rate out into Pisco. So remember, kings and queens, okay, to tell each of these individuals that this will be a hate raid. Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Tune in. I know it's Valentine's Day, but if you're lonely and you have no one to love you, maybe you can get a little love on my show. So tune in, call in, and it'll be fun. Okay? Bye-bye. Bye-bye,
All right, take care, guys. Have a good rest of your
Thanks
night.
for having us.
Bye.